most importantly, the days before independence and working with him after independence in the first 3 cabinets as well. Very good morning to you, and thank you so much for making time out to join us this morning.
Good morning, and thank you very much for having me.
Always a pleasure to talk to you. It's quite astonishing that the last time we actually sat down and had this conversation was exactly 12 months ago, in February, when we were, of course, reflecting on the life and times of the late Dr. Adikengo.
Indeed.
In terms of this, before you get into the news for this morning, how did the news reach you of the Founding Fathers passing, and what were some of your initial, feelings and reactions to that news?
Yeah, well, I don't live here in Windhoek, and for 1 or 2 reasons, I came over to attend to those issues, and I was informed that the founding was not feeling very well, and those who told me thought I would want to go and visit him. But I refrained because I did not just feel like visiting a person whom I have known for so many years as a vibrant person, energetic, lively, and to see him in a condition of helplessness. I resisted the temptation to visit him. And not long thereafter, somebody called me late in the morning. Not late in the morning, but early in the morning, around 1 o'clock. And immediately my phone rang. I knew something serious must have happened. And that was the news of his passing. It kept me awake the whole night. I tried to, do this or the other just to make my mind get away from the thoughts. But that was not possible. So I kept awake, just like what they did with the late Comrade Hage. They called me again at 2 o'clock in the night. And from there on, I stayed awake until in the morning. So that's how I got the news.
I think I was thinking about, because we were supposed to have the conversation yesterday, and I was thinking to myself, what is it that it's such a long and rich history and such a long and rich relationship. Where does one start interrogating that relationship? And I think the most natural place really is just at the beginning. And I know last year when we spoke, you said that, some of these leaders you have not met before, you first hear about them through the radio, hear about these big personalities before you actually went into exile and went to go meet them there as well. Take us to the very beginning. What were your initial, the first time, of course, hearing about the man Sam Nujoma, and then eventually that first encounter that you had with him?
While probably South Africa thought they were demonizing the name Nujoma, they popularized him to the extent that as children, because I learned about his name in the early 60s. In the early 60s, I was just, not a toddler, but a child. We used to sing about Nujoma. Kana Nujoma, apparently coming back to the country with the pen and the paper on which to write. That was the song. And we, as a child, you imagine this human being as invisible, such a strong person whom the Boers, talked almost everywhere. Yeah, so one would fear to meet him, yet wanting also to see what kind of a human being he was. So his name became really popular to the extent that we even got to know his parents' names.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And that had nothing to do with the parents, but since he became the news of almost every day, we got to know even the village where he was from.
Many people also that one has spoken to says that because of that legend, the fact that he was so much spoken about on radio, obviously trying to be demonized on the other side by the South African government, that also sort of gave a bit of an encouragement for a lot of young Namibians that wanted to go into exile, to go and study and etc. Sort of as an inspiration and motivation that he's out there actually galvanizing the support for the struggle.
Yeah, in the early 60s to the late 60s, the opportunities to leave the country was not really there. But the popularity of SWAPO and the United Nations became a galvanizing issue. And then Nujoma, as you don't know that time whether Nujoma was now UN or was SWAPO or Nujoma and Kaunda. Kaunda was said Kaunda Kazambia, the Kaunda of Zambia. So now as children we didn't know whether Kaunda, Zambia, Nujoma, UN, FIFIO, not UN, FIFIO. And SWAPO. You know, these were almost one and the same thing. And the mobilization by those who were politically aware, particularly the teachers and the unionists, now continue to mobilize, the public. And for us just to hate the system. Those who were in schools, like myself, I was in secondary school, and my question was always, I'm studying and what? From here. Should I now become the stooge of this regime, or what do I become?
So already by the end of high school, you were politically aware of the situation that you're finding yourselves in?
Oh, yes.
Based on this inspiration, based on all this information that was coming in?
Oh, yes, definitely. That was in the early 70s. We were already aware.
Take us through the first encounter. So when and where is the first time that you're meeting?
Yeah, we left. I left the country in 1974, in July. And with my group, we arrived in northern Zambia around that time, and that was towards August 26 celebration. From home, we didn't know what was the importance of August 26. And then when we went into the camps, our camps, we were now told to organize for the 26th of August. And on the 26th of August, he came, the president of SWAPO, Sam Nujoma. We were so excited. I'm telling you, some were even climbing on the trees just to to have a sight of him. Yeah. Sam Nujoma. And he came there just an ordinary guy, just an ordinary gentleman. Yeah, who could speak to us in Oshiwambo and English, and we were so impressed. Because when you hear so much about a person, you get your imagination as to
you have your own version of who they are in your mind.
Precisely. He was not, tall, just a middle-sized person. And I was expecting somebody tall and huge,
some big figure,
big, and really frightening. No, just a an ordinary, gentleman. He spoke to us and explained, the historical evolution of SWAPO and why the importance of August 26, and now encouraging us as youngsters what to do. Some must go to school. School in his vocabulary was always synonymous to the struggle. Yeah, education. We must get some of you who are coming from home to go to universities and to learn, because Namibia is going to be independent. That vision of him, of Namibia becoming independent.
So it was unwavering. That is, he was convinced this independence is going to come.
Every time he spoke to us, that was always the vision, and you feel as if independence was just coming, if not next month, maybe it's next year. Yeah. So and then he later started telling us where we would be meeting next time. Next time we will be meeting at the outskirts of Windhoek, and then you feel really like it's just around the corner. Independence is just around the corner.
So that motivation, that inspiration was always ready.
Inspiration. And even when you are, when I went to the UN Institute for Namibia, and he continued to come and lecture us. By the time he leaves, everybody would feel, no, what are we doing here? We must go to the front.
We are fired up.
We have fired up.
You had some responsibilities right before independence. Before we chat about, some of the first responsibilities after independence. Yeah. Obviously, as the party president, any instruction that is being carried out, particularly at the administrative level, has to come from him. Talk to us about those early days and some of those early responsibilities that you had now after Union with the SWAPO and under his leadership.
Yeah, after Union, I went to Union after military training, and I thought being trained now in public administration, I would still go back to the front. But then the Congress of the SWAPO Women's Council was coming shortly after the graduation. And without me knowing also, I went there because during the struggle, it was not really this lobby and the campaigns for positions. It was the meritocracy or the ability of somebody to carry out the task at hand. And when I went to that Congress, I hardly thought of being elected. But then others were just, talking among themselves. The best person to lead us in this respect is that lady. And I was elected. We contested, we were 3, and I won. And I was the youngest. By then, I was in my 20s.
Sure.
Yeah. And so then that election really catapulted me into hardcore SWAPO leadership position, because as Secretary for Women's Council or secretaries of the wings automatically become members of the Central Committee. And the Central Committee used to be a very, very important decision-making body of the party.
Used to be?
Yes.
I think that one we'll park it for another day.
Yeah, let's park it for another day. It used to be a very, very important decision-making body, because it's where, the military council reports the activities that have to do with the armed struggle. That's why I'm saying used to be. You get all these reports and decision and strategies as to what is now next, at the international front, at diplomatic front, whatever front, it's there. And as such, you grow as time goes. To such an extent, really, that when we returned home, even if you had given me the position of being the president of SWAPO, I would have just saluted and, took it over. Yeah.
Well, come 1990, I think, I think there are two important things which I really wanted to highlight. But first, I can't get into the work in the administration without really talking about that poignant time of the drafting of the Constitution. A couple of days ago on the 9th of... In fact, the announcement, it was also amazing that it really coincided with, on the actual day, the 9th of February, Constitution Day, the passing of founding that was announced by President Bumba. You were one of the 6 women that were on the Committee of 21 on the drafting of the Constitution. Let's just reflect a little bit on the importance of this one, because for many people, if you look at it over the last 35 years, there's been a lot of stuff said about the Constitution. But it seems like it's one of those ideals that we all believe in as Namibians. If you look at it right now, how we deal and how we handle the Constitution, does it show what you would envision as the founders of this document and this belief, this conviction?
Well, in a way, it does. It has helped us to create institutions, processes, and whatever systems. And as it's said, the law or the Constitution it's a living thing. Yeah? The Constitution is a living document. Living in the sense that as the nation grows into maturity, there are certain aspects of it that requires the upgrading, the growth, at the same level with the nation as it also evolves. The young people, you people of today, do not have the same needs as us, the older generation. And therefore, you may have realized certain needs that you would think will take you into the future better than the way we drafted it. Because the law is to facilitate the growth, not to constrain. Yeah, it's to constrain where it's necessary. For example, in criminal matters, you can say it must constrain. But growth, it must allow society to grow and facilitate that things are made smoother other than to restrict. That way, I feel that we cannot just look at the Constitution as a document cast in stone. You can't.
So it must be a living document that evolves as society changes.
As society changes. Yeah.
One of the things, if one looks at it, in terms of the overall understanding, I was reading extracts of pages that were put down by Dr. Kengob around the thinking and the Committee of 21's thinking around the draft, that really the whole idea around the Constitution was to limit state power to a certain extent. One of the main debates, of course, were whether we should have a ceremonial president versus whether we should have an executive president. But you chose an executive president, but that executive power that the president and the cabinet have also has constraints or limitations built into it. Talk to us a little bit around that thinking of the separation of powers and making sure that state power in the Constitution is limited so that there is no abuse or a chance of a dictatorship.
Our thinking was based on the prevailing political and experiential situation we come from. As you know, it was not just SWAPO, it was all other political parties that gained seats on the Constituent Assembly. There was those fears in all of us, as to whether we would be inheriting a system like that of racist South Africa, or others were thinking that maybe we will come with the autocratic kind of system like elsewhere in the world. And therefore, the caution that while we should have probably an executive president, there must be checks and balances, built in, so that we do not create a situation like the ones we want to get out of. And therefore, we created all those
checks and balances. Yeah.
Checks and balances to facilitate that in as much that we have the executive president, that president should not have powers to decree, for example, other than the parliament or other institutions to check on these powers, because human beings are just human beings. Yeah.
But one of the things, of course, the powers that it used was to appoint you as the Deputy Minister for Wildlife, Conservation and Tourism in the 1990s. So you were part of that first group that really formed the administration under the president. How did that news come to you? And I know obviously you were still quite young at that stage as well, and many say that one of President Nujoma's strong leadership skills or attributes was that he was able to spot talent and entrust young people with huge responsibilities. Talk to me about that entrance into, the administration as Deputy Minister in 1990.
Yeah, it did not get me by surprise in a way, because my expertise and my ability to argue and do things was really found out during the negotiations for the Constitution. As you said, we were just 21 members, and I was the only woman, actually, amongst these men. And I was able to stand up for issues where others felt probably the SWAPO men were not men enough to really discipline me. And when we went into the Constituent Assembly generally to debate general issues, I was MP on my own, despite my young age, and therefore my ability was not only realized that time. Actually, from the liberation struggle itself, I was identified as one of the able female youngsters.
So where did that confidence come from, though, to stand against all of these men? Because you always seem to be, the only woman that's sitting amongst a group of strong, powerful men, whether it was in Central Committee, whether it was at the Constituent Assembly, and of course in Cabinet when you were appointed as Minister of Youth.
Yeah, I should really go back to my upbringing. Yeah, we are born so many, 10 in number, and only 3 men. All of us were ladies. But then I grew up without a man in front of me, a boy in front of me. Although the sibling I come after was a lady, and then she passed on. Then there was a gentleman in front, but that gentleman grew up with my paternal grandmother. Oh. So I grew up like a boy at home. I
So you were to be independent?
Would look after the cattle, I would milk, I would do everything. And my father relied on me, really, just like a boy in the home. And and then because of the distance to schooling, I was then given to other families also to take care of me while going to school. And when you you grow up with people who are not your biological parents, you bear difficulties, and you rely so much on your mind, your strength, yourself, to be able to overcome some of the difficulties.
I want to turn our attention a little bit to the Founding Fathers' leadership style. In cabinet, of course, your first substantive post was as the Minister of Youth and Sport from 1991 to 1996. And one of the biggest challenges for a lot of the liberation movements is now you have to come in now from being a commander to running a political administration and a government. Reflect a little bit on his leadership style and that transformation, I think, especially during those first years from 1991 to 1996.
Yeah, you know, I was given that ministry. It used to be a directorate from the Ministry of Education, and then it was split to become a ministry. And when I was assigned that portfolio, minister of a ministry, with no ministry, the structure.
No building.
No building, no nothing.
So you had to start up setting up the directorates.
I started from the scratch. I remember going to the Ministry of Works, because we were told Ministry of Works is the housing for all the government buildings. I went to Works and made that request. I had a permanent secretary, and we were going around just following one another, because we did not
So it's just the two of you that are the ministry now?
The two of us. The two of us, yeah. So then I was given a lady, she's originally from Ethiopia, she's an engineer. And apparently there was a building where one of the shops used to be. And then we went there, it was just an empty building. Then with her, we started, directing. The office of the minister must be somewhere here, just to partition, that building. And we got our housing there. And then the structure now, the two directorates, we must come up with them, because it's now Ministry of Youth and Sport. Directorate of Youth and Directorate of Sport. And then the recruitment of the personnel, the two directors. Initially, the director of sport was a lady, and the director of youth was a gentleman. And then in the middle, we swapped them, because the man was more aligned with sport than, and we thought the lady would deal much more with youth matters.
How was the leadership style from his side during the time that you're now setting this up, and what were some of the guiding principles that he shared, of course, to make sure that this thing is a success?
You are not given directives. You are given an assignment. Yeah, you must go and do it. How you do it?
That's up to you.
It's up to you. But he's expecting reports. Yeah, you must report how successful or your failure, in either cabinet, or he calls you one-on-one to, just to report. What are your difficulties?
What is your fondest memory of the founding father? Perhaps something that we don't know. Your most fond memory of him.
Yeah, the founding father was very skillful in consultation. When there are very heavy issues, he does not just bring them in the open like that. He would first start negotiating behind the scene, one-on-one. When you see, for example, a call very early in the morning on a day of cabinet, then you know
there's a negotiation coming up.
There is a negotiation for something he wants to push through, and he wants support for that. And therefore, cabinet was not controversial in a
so it was very consultative.
Very consultative. Very consultative. Yeah.
That in terms of the legacy, I mean, much has been said, much is what we know about him. But for you personally, how do you want us to remember him as a Namibian nation? What would be the best way to celebrate his legacy?
Well, Nujoma was first and foremost a visionary person. Really, of things he kept telling us and how they materialized afterwards. It just surprises you. And if we had followed the Vision 2030, precisely as it was put, I think by now we would be somewhere in the developmental stage of our country. And he loved education. He loved children. Every time you may remember that he used to tell us as adults to eat once a day, for the children to eat 3 times a day.
3 times a day.
Yeah, because the children need to grow up, they need to be strong, they need to get educated, and yeah.
I just want to close off with this one. I think quite an important one. We know the moniker "One Namibia, One Nation" was what he always preached. We used to get so excited to go to the stadium so that we can just hear him give that message. But it seems like, from different quarters, depending where you're standing from, that unity is not looking as strong as it used to be.
Yeah.
How do we go back to that One Namibia, One Nation moniker and start living that in our day-to-day interactions with each other as Namibians?
I think we should take up the mantle. The generation that have witnessed what Nujoma was all about. There are so much that we can really cling to and say, we are going, at personal level, I'm going to pursue this drive, And then also the leadership of the country to go back to the roots and start picking up those slogans that made us to overcome many of the challenges that could have really put us astray at independence. But because of those policies, we are able to be here. And the world is envying us. Namibia is a peaceful country. Imagine what happened in Mozambique after the fiasco of their election. Yeah, they banned everything. They killed each other. But here, nothing of that sort happened. And the world is looking at us.
So you still believe in that,
yes,
in that mantra, and that we can push forward as a country?
We can push forward as a country, provided we stick to our constitution, our policies, and the way we have been looking at each other. One Namibia, one nation. That slogan should not die. It should not die.
Pendukeni, thank you so much for making time out to join us and for this conversation. I know you and I can go on and on, but I have to let you go now. Thank you so much.
You're most welcome. Thank you.
Now we have it, Pendukeni Ivula-Ithana, just reflecting a little bit on her time working with the founding father, of course, as secretary for SWAPO Women before independence, and of course working on the Constituent Assembly as one of the drafters, one of only six women on the Committee of 21 that drafted the Namibian Constitution, and of course also reflecting on a time in cabinet immediately after independence with immense responsibility of setting up a new Ministry of Youth and Sport from scratch. We'll continue now to reflect on